Think we can get started. Welcome everyone again. Thanks for joining us today. We have our dear guest, Casey Ruff, sharing his wisdom and journey with us. I'm super excited. I think you all are going to find this extremely helpful and valuable, hopefully. I think Casey is one of the great examples, living examples of how those interventions can impact our life in so many different ways. He's also really inspired and really dedicated to the field and doing a lot of work that I would love to hear more about from him. But I think he's just such a great testament in terms of how different strategies and healthy lifestyle can benefit us in different ways. He is more into the carnivore diet and style of eating, which is why I think he's going to be an invaluable resource for us to hear more of, since most of us are on the ketogenic diet. So that's a great insight to have as a comparison and learn more about. Maybe some of you are familiar and maybe some are not. Or if you're curious, I think we're on to something exciting. Casey, hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Donica. Thank you so very much. That's a lot of very kind words, and you're setting the bar very high. So I don't want to disappoint everybody.
I don't think there is such a chance. We're such, the nature of our community is that we're just driven towards a common mission of finding ways to do better, right? Like to optimize health and to thrive despite some potentially some diagnosis or some life events that may have made us believe that we have to rely solely on medications that are oftentimes not as efficient and things like that. But other than that, I think we're all amazing people here. I'm personally very inspired by the community, and I know it's like-minded people that are just thirsty for this kind of information. So I think you're right on point. And I know people got a chance to familiarize a little bit with your background and your certifications and why you're someone who can talk confidently about this. But if you don't mind, would you share a little bit about yourself and where you are today in terms of this coaching, this way of eating, living, and working with people as well?
Yeah, of course, Donica. And again, thank you so very much for hosting me on your show. It's a real honor to be here. Yeah, so my name's Casey. I have been a personal trainer for just about 18 years now. I was in college studying architecture and thought that's what the course of my career would be. But one year I started training in the off season at a certain gym, and I started watching the personal trainers. I had always been somewhat interested in health and fitness growing up, being a little bit on the overweight side, kind of the chubby kid, made me really motivated to, learn how to lift weights and do cycling competitively and ice hockey competitively. And so, yeah, just watching the personal trainers, I thought was really interesting how they were working with their clients. And so I went into the manager's office and asked what I needed to do to get certified, and got my certification. It took several months, and thought that maybe it would be fun to be a trainer for a few months or a few years while I was studying architecture. And I just ended up enjoying training so much that I have been a personal trainer ever since. I was working for a big corporation at the time, and I was trained specifically on how to measure metabolism on people. So if anybody has ever seen like a VO2 max test where somebody's wearing a mask and the mask is collecting somebody's respirations and it's going into a computer that kind of analyzes things. Basically, we could tell people how many calories they were burning based on different activities, whether they were exercising or whether they were resting. And these analyzers would also be able to tell how much oxygen and carbon dioxide were being exchanged in a person, which would basically tell people how much fat versus how much carbohydrate they were burning. And so initially, we didn't really understand how to use that tool very well. We just kind of knew that if you were doing any kind of caloric restriction, if you were not eating very many calories, and especially if you were over exercising and matching those two things up, what would happen is over time, you would decrease your metabolic rate. Your body would burn less and less calories. And Donica, I know, with your history and everything you shared with me on your podcast, that Jason Fung was a big influence for you in your life. And he was for me as well. And he talks about that a lot in his famous book, The Obesity Code, where if you do a diet the way most people do, and again, especially if you do it to where you are over exercising, most people know that that works temporarily. But over time, especially in the case of like weight loss, people start plateauing and they feel worse and worse and feel cold and have increased cravings. And then, they give into those cravings and they think it's their own willpower. So people trying diets and doing exercise programs, think they're failing all the time and have really poor self-esteem because they can't get it to work, when really what they're doing is causing the body to burn less and less calories on its own. And so I was, using that, and we were understanding that. And over time, we learned that, again, the body can burn energy from one of two major fuel sources. You can burn carbohydrates as a fuel source, or you can burn fat as a fuel source. And again, I had a background in endurance sport, in particular cycling. And I knew that when I was competing in cycling, if I wasn't always eating sugar as I was out on the bike and training, the amount of sugar that a human can store is so small, it's so tiny, that it's a very finite resource and it runs out. And this is where, for an endurance athlete, we call that bonking, or you hit the wall. It's basically like an endurance athlete just running out of gas suddenly, and it's just burning through all the sugar. And so what I would have to do for these competitive cycling events is I would have to eat so much sugar all the time, which makes your stomach hurt. It's terribly inconvenient, and all the while, when you only have such a little amount of sugar in your body, you also have, even the leanest person will have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of calories of fat as energy on the body. And so for an endurance athlete, it's very advantageous to teach the body how to burn fat as fuel, because you have so much more of that energy available versus the sugar that runs out. And so we learned over time that if you shifted the diet and changed your training towards more of a higher fat diet, lower carbohydrate type diet, you would be much better at burning fat, and you would not have that effect of like running out of energy. You could go for several hours without running out of energy. And so that was really pivotal in my journey. Eventually I got certified as a nutrition coach, and was used to giving people all the standard information. You need lots of whole grains, you need to try to get a variety of vegetables, you need to eat the rainbow, lots of fruits, your protein sources need to be lean sources. So typically, if you are going to eat red meat, it's like sirloin or really lean ground beef or chicken or turkey or fish and all that stuff. And just over the years of giving people that advice, it just would not work for people. Eventually, we were doing weight loss contests with people at the gym that I was working at. And one of our participants asked me one day, like, hey, I just lost like 3 pounds in 3 days. What is this keto stuff? This is back in 2018, when I was starting to see it a little bit, what keto was, what a ketogenic diet was. The word became a little bit more popular. And so that was the rabbit hole that I started to crawl in 7 years ago, and have never come out of since. I haven't listened to any music in my car since then. It's just this really fascinating type of a diet that's exactly the opposite of everything that I was trained in, everything that I was taught to give to people. And boy, after so many years of failures and things not working, all of a sudden to find something again that's completely unconventional and the opposite of what I've been trained, and it works amazing for a lot of people, and not just weight loss. Like, people would come back and say, like, not only have I lost 20 pounds, but now I don't even care because I don't need to snack anymore. I don't take naps anymore. My joints feel a lot better. There was all these other like side benefits that people kept reporting. And it's just been this fascinating journey into learning about how a human should be properly burning fat and using that as a fuel source, and how many different things in a human get really fixed and sorted out when somebody eats this way. So it's been an amazing journey, and that's what I've been doing for the last several years.
Amazing. And thank you for doing it. We all love hearing about the results. And what are some of the common myths that you have to go through? Like, when you introduce this in the fitness industry that is strictly against, like you mentioned, leaner meat, eat the rainbow. Now this is going to be a lot more restrictive. So I'm curious to hear what were some of the biggest things, and maybe even for yourself, right? Like, I know certainly for me, it was such a push. I had to battle so many inner doubts in terms of, is this really healthy? How could it be the opposite of everything we knew was healthy? So I'm curious to hear your inner, doubts, and then how did you go through those with your clients? Because I'm sure there were some that did not buy into it as easily.
Yeah, totally. Great question. I mean, the number one thing I would say most people say, and I certainly have my doubts about, is the entire story about cholesterol, and in particular, the different kinds of cholesterol and what things cholesterol does inside of our body. I'll say it best, especially like more on the carnivore side. One of my guests on my podcast had a great quote that I love that basically said, if you don't think carnivore is weird, I think you're weird. And that's kind of the way I think about it. Like, if you don't question eating a high fat, ketogenic, or carnivore diet, you should have questions about cholesterol, or you've been living under a rock. And that's what, there are several multi-trillion-dollar industries that are built on what we call the diet heart hypothesis, that basically says the more saturated fat you eat, the more cholesterol you're going to have, and the more cholesterol you have, the more you're going to die of a heart attack. And that's just so ingrained in most of us now that I think that's the number one thing. It really, those industries would all fail if people understood that, just that one thing. So that was a really big one. Another one that I come across a lot that also Jason Fung writes about is there are literally more calories in 1 gram of fat than there are in 1 gram of carbohydrates. Protein and carbohydrates, for every gram that you consume, you get 4 grams or 4 calories. And for every gram of fat, you get 9 calories. So right off the bat, the idea is, well, if I'm eating all this fat, aren't I eating so many calories that I'm going to gain weight and get fat? Which just doesn't happen to be the case. But when we demonized fats because of the cholesterol story, we then had to kind of say, well, fat is also bad because there's so many calories. So when we in this country and around the world started to gain a bunch of weight, and we have an obesity crisis now that we didn't have when we first started telling people about cholesterol back in the 1950s and 1960s, we needed a way to say that fat was also bad for obesity. So the really easy one was not to say that the fattening foods, which are the carbohydrates, are bad, but those are the good ones because they have less calories. And if you eat more carbohydrates, you're going to consume less calories than if you ate the fat. So that was one I needed to kind of learn about and understand how fat metabolism works in the body and how fat literally does not make you fat. Those are some of the big ones. There's a lot along the way. And I think another one for people that's a little bit weird to hear is that the necessity for carbohydrates is zero. And that includes quote unquote healthy things like fruits and vegetables and fiber. Like, the necessity for fiber for humans is zero. We don't need to eat fruits and vegetables. That's not to say that everybody has to do a carnivore diet the way that I do. I certainly don't say that, people got fat because they overconsumed apples and broccoli. But it is learning that, I think in best case scenario, some of these fruits and vegetables are not as good for us as we think. And I've seen them cause damage and harm in certain people. So again, that's not to say I'm on the street corner yelling at everybody who's eating fruits and vegetables. That's not my job. But it is learning that, like, when I was going to the store and buying tons of exotic fruits and vegetables and all kinds of times of the year when these fruits and vegetables are not in season, and spending so much time and money buying these things, preparing these things, cooking these things, throwing these things away at the end of the week when I wouldn't eat them, to learn that all of that was not necessarily good for us or necessary was pretty helpful and simplified the diet quite a bit. So I think those are some of the main pillars of the misconceptions and myths that we have about some of these things that we've been taught since we've been kids.
Yeah. And they are all so big and so controversial. So it's taking us a while, but I think we're making great progress. People are starting to learn and to investigate and just do their own research and see what really all of this is about, and seeing that connection between industry profits and not necessarily being related to our best health interests. So we're getting there, but slowly.
Yeah, it's taking a while, but I don't know about you, but I feel about as optimistic as I've ever felt that we're reaching a critical mass. And like you said, people are, I think they smell a rat. I think they know that the medical industry is not what they thought it was, that foods are making them sick. What they're told about what is heart healthy and what is not real. I mean, I will just say, like, maybe you saw the headline about a month ago. It was some stupid study that is just so poorly done. It's a joke. But even on the CNN page, they reported, it said something like, you will have a 20% reduction in dementia if you replace your animal proteins with plant proteins, which again is utter nonsense. It takes about 5 minutes to read through the actual study to see that it's complete garbage. But I would say even the CNN article, not necessarily that went to directly to carnivores, but people all over the country responded in comments on social media. And most people, I would say a majority of people said, like, this is absolutely ridiculous. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. This is not based on any clear science. So I think that's really positive and optimistic that people are kind of waking up to the fact that we've been lied to and not for our benefit. And so, yeah, I'm optimistic.
I'm absolutely optimistic as well. And I think we're definitely on the same page in terms of that. And I also think that as hard as it is for us to almost like betray everything we've been taught, the reason why we are even questioning it is because it's not working. It's because we firsthand feel the impact of those foods, and we see the mental health crisis that we're in. That is just a testament to how something is wrong. And when we start doing those shifts, even controversial initially, like, right, if we don't buy into it, we start feeling better. And to me, there is no more objective factor than how I feel, right? Like if I'm thriving, if I'm sleeping well, if my cognition is like 10x, I can remember things, my mood is stable, all the things that no medication ever could do, or type of eating, that's a pretty big green flag, right? Like it means a lot. And I think all of us that are here and people that are interested in those topics are lived experiences, people that are testing it themselves, starting to feel better. And at this point, hopefully learning how to even optimize and like how to make it sustainable and what is best, and how to fine tune it almost. So tell us now more about your way of eating, and maybe, the transition, like were you on keto at first and how you got to where you are at, and what this type of eating does for you. How do you feel? And maybe more in details about those that may be not familiar with the carnivore. How is it different than keto, and what a day may look like being on?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So yeah, so using the metabolic carts, I learned that if you ate fat, you would burn fat a little bit better. Eventually, I found the work of Nina Teicholz and her book, The Big Fat Surprise, and learning the history of why we've demonized fat was so fascinating. And then, in 2018, meeting this guy and learning about ketogenic diets really shifted the course of everything that I wanted to study. I was getting pigeonholed in at the gym I was in. People were starting to call me Keto Casey because that's all I was really talking about. And I didn't want to be that guy. And luckily I had a manager who recognized that I was learning about something that nobody else knew about. And he was like, no, you should just embrace this and go into this. And so I kind of did. And I think you understand, if you're in the low carbohydrate space, the ketogenic space for long enough, you start to learn about this strange subset of people doing a low carbohydrate diet. And they're doing a no carbohydrate diet, essentially eating all of their calories from animal products, or at least a vast majority of their calories from animal products. And I'll never forget, I listened to the Joe Rogan podcast with a doctor in his 50s. And this doctor was only eating ribeyes, and he was setting records in deadlifting and rowing competitions. And I got about halfway through the episode when this doctor said, I actually don't rely on blood markers and blood tests as much as I used to. I think the best indication of your health is how you feel. And I think that blood markers can be, maybe a little unreliable at best, or maybe we just don't understand how all of these things react in somebody. And I thought the idea of that was so stupid. I turned off that episode. I did not listen to it. I only went back last year and listened to the episode. And of course, that episode was with Dr. Sean Baker, who is a carnivore. And yeah, I just thought it was ridiculous that this guy was seemingly thriving, but he wasn't eating any vegetables, which to me absolutely made no sense. I was already keto and felt really great, and my endurance had really improved doing sports, and I felt really good. My energy was great. And yeah, I thought for sure that, well, what about if you don't have any fiber? What about if you don't have any of these amazing nutrients that come from vegetables, for example? Like, how do people do that? And so, I was curious, eventually got kind of back into that world and started learning about it. And it was May of 2019 that I decided for the first time that I was going to do a 30-day experiment on a carnivore diet, which again is essentially cutting out anything that isn't animal products. And it was about 10 days in. I was feeling okay. Obviously, there's digestive issues and things that you deal with in the beginning when your body's getting used to removing fiber and vegetables. But I had something very stressful happen to me where somebody at my work needed to refund all of their personal training sessions. As a personal trainer, you work 100% commission. And so that meant money out of my paycheck. All the time that I had spent with this person for free and scheduled sessions, I now had to unschedule. And I just remember going through this stressful thing, and like it was just fine, and I wish the person the best of luck, and I hope they found what they needed somewhere else and got the help that they needed. And it was just kind of a strange feeling to sit back and say, well, why didn't I worry about that? Why didn't that ruin my day or my week like it did before? And just things in my life just started to be a lot more joyful. And I realized that I'm fortunate that I didn't have the same story that you had, where you dealt with, a clinical diagnosis of mental disorders and very heavy, difficult things. But I did realize that I was spinning around in anxiety all the time about stuff that was never going to happen to me. And it was only apparent after it had gone away that I was dealing with that. And I'll give you a really good example. I live in the Salt Lake Valley, and in the Salt Lake Valley of Utah, sometimes in the wintertime, cold air will come. Salt Lake's like a bowl, basically. And so cold air will come in and it will sometimes trap all the air in the valley, which means our pollution gets really, really bad in certain weeks in the middle of the winter. And you could be in the valley and could look like a clear day, but you once you get out of it, if you drive up the canyon near the ski resorts and you look back, you realize, oh, the sky is really blue up here. I thought it was blue sky down there, and it was very polluted. It only looked to me like that while I was in it. And I say that to say that was what it was like to live with anxiety. And once I stepped away from that, yeah, it just, everything was so much more clear, and the anxiety just kind of went away. There have been times that I have cheated on the diet. There was one time in particular that I bought a pie and I started to eat a slice of the pie, and then I had another slice, and then I had another slice, and then I had another slice, way more than I wanted to eat. And before long, that pie was gone. And sure enough, my sleep was terrible. My anxiety was really, really high. It all came back. And it took a good day and a half, 2 days to kind of like deal with that and feel good again. And so I just realized, you know what, I'm probably a little bit more on the side of a sugar addict. I don't seem to be able to stop when I want to. And so that's been really good motivation for me to stay on the diet. It's now been about 6 years. Coming up on April 2025 will be my 6-year anniversary of a carnivore diet. And so, yeah, it's been really good. I would say some of the biggest benefits are your digestion is so much better. My skin clarity is way better. I never get sunburns anymore. I had chronic athlete's foot that just simply went away. I would hurt my shoulder typically like once a year playing ice hockey, and that has not happened at all. I did get a bit of a cold this year, but it was really mild and passed within a few days, where the flu is going around me pretty good right now. All of that seems to be a lot better. So that's been a really good motivator to stay on a carnivore diet. And you asked what a typical day was. I will say also that the way we define animals in nature that are hyper carnivores, what we do is we say that a hyper carnivore in nature eats at least 75% or more of their calories from animal products. And I would say that's what I use as my definition for a carnivore diet. I think too many people get stuck in the weeds of, can I have an avocado? Can I have coffee? Can I have spices or condiments? It's like, I think oftentimes we miss the point of like, it's just a carnivore diet means that a bulk majority of your calories is coming from animal products. Some people have different tolerances. Some people can have a certain amount of fruit or honey and feel okay. Other people need to be a little bit more strict. Our mutual friend, Robin Dobbins, I spent time with her over the weekend at the conference in Las Vegas, and she's one that has to be a little bit more strict. And if she deviates even a little bit from a carnivore diet, her symptoms of bipolar come back. And so she's got to be a little bit more on the strict side of, we went out to eat several times, and she needs to be careful about what she eats. And certainly some people have that. I don't necessarily need to. I just have that bit of sugar addiction enough to say like, it's better for me to abstain than it is to try to moderate. Some people can do party drugs over the weekend, or they can have a drink over the weekend and go to work on Monday and be just fine. And addicts cannot. It sends them in a tailspin and they have a tough time. And I'm a little bit more on that side. So On a carnivore diet, I do have coffee in the morning. I mix my coffee with a little bit of like MCT oil and butter. During the day, sometimes I will have my first meal around like 1 or 2. If my schedule allows it, I might have, 6 to 10 boiled eggs that I have ready. And then I know for me that I can eat about 1.5 pounds of red meat in one sitting. I can't really do much more than that. And so my nighttime, is whatever sounds good. I try to have a few things on hand. Lately, I've been doing either like a chuck roast in the crock pot with some broth, and that makes this like really stringy chuck roast that you can drink the broth. And it's really delicious and warming. I'll often do steak several times a week, which sounds expensive, but it's actually not when you're only eating about 1.5 pounds of steak in a day. That's a meal is only like 15-20 bucks. Last night I did burger patties, these little sliders I got, and cooked those up, and those were absolutely delicious. And so, yeah, that's pretty typical on a carnivore diet. Again, some people can have plant foods and tolerate them just fine, and they don't get cravings, and that enhances their enjoyment of the diet. And so, again, I don't get too stuck in the weeds as far as that goes. But that's kind of a typical day. Most people on a carnivore diet learn very quickly that all animal products are fine. So chicken is fine, fish is fine, pork is fine. But if the foundation is not fatty meat, in particular, like red meat or maybe eggs, people just don't feel that well. And so red meat for most people on a carnivore diet should really be the foundation. You can use those other things as you want, as you enjoy them. But for example, like if I play a hockey game where the night before I just had some chicken breast, I will not feel nearly as good as if I had a steak the night before. And that's a pretty common pattern I see with a lot of people that I coach on carnivore. So that's a day in the life. As you know, once you go on a ketogenic diet, you're just simply not that hungry anymore. You don't need to snack. It's, fasting is so easy and convenient, and it's just it's great for so many different reasons. So that's kind of how I consider that. A carnivore diet does fit underneath the umbrella of a low carbohydrate or even a ketogenic diet. It's just a different version of it where people are just not eating a lot of plant foods. So that's day in the life of a carnivore for me. It's pretty darn easy. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And what I'm thinking about is, do you measure ketones? Are you actually in ketosis while on carnivore?
I don't measure. Again, I don't necessarily have like a medical reason that I need to be in a ketogenic diet. Obviously, with metabolic psychiatry, some people do, and some people understand that they need to be on a higher fat version of a ketogenic diet to have those high ketones to really fuel the brain properly. I have had my ketones measured once. It was at a conference in San Diego. I ate a pretty typical day, and I saw that my ketones were, I think, either 0.5 or 0.8. So I was in a mild, level of ketosis, and that was fine. I also there's certain like physical things that you notice when you are in a state of ketosis. There's a certain way that your mouth kind of feels almost like a little bit dry as you're breathing out acetone, which is one of the main ketone bodies. You also just have this real loss of hunger or this real increase in energy. That energy has to come from somewhere. And ketosis is simply just breaking down fat, and ketones are an end result of that. And it's a water soluble fuel that your body, your brain, your heart can use as a fuel source, which is why it's so great for, again, mental health and metabolic psychiatry. So I don't tend to measure myself. If somebody is going to measure, I would just want them to understand what the reason for why they're measuring is. Some people need to, and some people don't. For my case, I don't really need to. So good question.
Mm-hmm. And do you find one or the other better for certain things? I guess, when you work with your clients, do you advise them to do one or the other based on specific traits or like agendas?
It's a great question. Yes, I think there are certain justifications for taking a ketogenic diet and making it a little bit more strict and making it be more of like a carnivore style diet. A carnivore diet to me is a very healing kind of a diet. So I noticed that a lot of people on keto, they feel awesome and they lose a bunch of weight, and it gets to be very easy. They don't have a lot of hunger, but there might still be lingering things that people are dealing with. People still might be having joint pain. They might still be having, not exactly like mental healing the way that they would want. Just little niggling things that just kind of hang on. And I found that taking a step towards a carnivore diet, even temporarily, that step for a lot of people can cause all kinds of different things to fix. Again, normally when I see somebody go ketogenic, I know they lost weight and they feel better. When I see somebody take the next step to carnivore, there might be 20 different weird random things that all of a sudden improve for that person. And they might not have to be on a carnivore diet for the rest of their lives. They may be able to reintroduce some plant foods and be just fine, which is great. So yeah, it just kind of depends on the person. It's also, we have to acknowledge that, doing a ketogenic diet itself can be a challenge. It might be tricky at first, and a carnivore diet can be even trickier. There are, different social situations that are uncomfortable for me. Like, I can't go out to eat everywhere all the time and always have something to eat. I have to be careful about the way I prepare my food, and I buy my food and largely prepare it at home to be able to overcome that. And so we have to acknowledge that there are challenges with a carnivore diet. I don't know many people that do carnivore diets forever for the rest of their life. It's certainly very easy for me at this point, and the benefits are so great, and the downsides of not doing it are so high that it's very motivating. But yeah, I think there are some justifications for people going a little bit more strict. Again, it sounds crazy when you first are telling somebody, but plants want to live. The plants do not want to die. They have been here on this earth a lot longer than we have, and they have developed strategies to protect themselves from things like insects or rodents or other mammals that try to get at them and kill them. And so they do have some level of protection. I think fruits for a lot of people are very safe, and when people eat fruit, you assume that it's only going to be in season, and the plant gives you this sweet thing that most all of us think is delicious, and we eat it, and then we're going to go somewhere and poop out seeds that help the tree to grow. And so it behooves the plants to offer us fruits in a certain season. But the leaves, the stems, the stalks, the roots, the seeds in particular, like, those are parts of plants that they do not want to be eaten or killed, and they will fortify themselves. And so I have seen some people build up in some of these anti-nutrients, these chemicals that plants make. They can build up in some people over the course of a long time, and those people may need to eliminate some of those plants, at least temporarily, until they can restore health in a certain way. So again, it's not for everybody, but if you were somebody that ate a lot of almonds, a lot of spinach, a lot of kale or chard, you might have health issues because of that, and eliminating plants all the way might be very helpful. So
yeah, and I hear a lot more often about that oxalate dumping. Probably that's one of the biggest things that may happen. How do you advise to transition safely if someone, and I love what you're saying there, that, especially when we're keto, we can kind of have the freedom to play around and switch between. They're just so beautifully complementing each other that they don't have to, we don't have to be super strictly and like stick to just one, and play it by ear and see what works at what time, because carnivore, as you said, you may not be able to have as much freedom to dine out, for example, right? But if someone decides to transition and try it, because also what you're saying is that it's like almost like a level up from keto in terms of benefits. So how do they what is the safest way that you have found for people to do that transition?
such a great question. I'll start by saying, let's start with somebody who maybe was not consuming a bunch of oxalates in particular. Let's say somebody that's already low carb, and they're not having a lot of almonds, they're not having a lot of spinach in particular. Maybe somebody who wasn't vegetarian or vegan for many years. The transition into carnivore, I mostly tell people it's like a pool that is kind of a cooler temperature, and the pool has a gradual end, and it also has the big diving board. And honestly, most people, they can really choose which one they want to do. Like, how do you want to get used to the temperature in the pool? Some people like to wade in and go very slowly. That person may want to just start to introduce a little bit more proteins, a little bit more of the fat that comes from animal products, and start to taper down on, some of the fruits and vegetables and other plant foods they're eating. You can do that very gradually, and that works great for a lot of people. Some people are more the type to, like, I just want to get this over with. It's gonna be harder. Like, you're gonna suffer, but they want to just go right to the diving board and cannonball their way right in. Again, I think most people can safely be able to do that. It is a different story for somebody that, like you said, has been consuming a lot of oxalates in their life. Oxalates in particular are one of those anti-nutrient compounds, certainly not the only one, but one that does build up in certain people. And to demonstrate this, I'll have somebody, like, in their head, take a piece of raw spinach and chew it up in your mouth. And I'll ask them, like, what does your mouth feel like after eating raw spinach? And most people notice there's a kind of a grittiness almost. There's like a little bit of that like interesting kind of mouth feel. What they're feeling in their mouth is oxalate crystals. Those are literally like microscopic toothpicks or needles that the plant is using literally to defend itself, to tear up the mouth of, insects that eat spinach. And that is going inside your body and causing lots of damage. And yeah, there's certain foods that have more oxalate than others. And if somebody has been consuming a high amount of them for a long time, when they stop, they will experience what you mentioned, oxalate dumping, where the body that has been sequestering, holding on to all these oxalates is now finally saying, like, great, we don't need to hang on to these. Let's get these out of here. And they come out in wicked, wicked ways for some people. I know people that used to be vegetarian, vegan, and were eating massive amounts of raw spinach and almonds and all those things that we mentioned. And literally years later on a carnivore diet, are still dealing with oxalate dumping symptoms. So for that person, as much as they may want to step away from oxalate foods, you need to be very, very careful. You need to step away very gently. So we recommend that somebody have maybe a moderate to high oxalate food every second to third day, so that the body doesn't just release all of them all at once, because it can be quite a painful process to dump all of those. So, but again, that's in a small subset. That's not to freak everybody out. It's just, if you were the one that was putting cups of spinach into a blender in the morning every single day, thinking you were doing yourself a lot of favors health-wise, those are the people that need to be very, very, very careful about getting that out of their diet. They need to step away very slowly.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for providing all that info. That's really valuable. And are there any other things like that almost people need to be aware of before or consider before they dive in? Any warning signs?
Yeah, good question. Not necessarily. A carnivore diet is basically just focusing on what foods are the most nutrient dense and bioavailable for humans, and have the least amount of those anti-nutrients. And if you think about that, you kind of land on a diet that is very high in, especially that, ruminant animal meat, where an animal is well suited to digest grasses. They can consume grass and other plants and turn it into high quality fats and proteins. And so that said, it's a very safe diet. Anybody can usually tolerate it pretty well. Again, you may want to consider how you want to transition, if you're kind of a rip the band-aid off type of a person, or you want to go a little bit more gradually. If that's more sustainable for you, that's great. But generally speaking, most people should be able to tolerate a decent amount of meat. Again, the ones I would say that need to be careful are people that have been vegan or vegetarian for a long time, because not only might they have a lot of those anti-nutrients like oxalate, but they also may have changed the pH of their stomach content. We have very, very highly acidic stomachs. Most people don't know this. Our stomachs we're not even the same as carnivores in nature. We're actually a lot closer to scavengers in nature, which can handle like rotting meat, essentially. That's how acidic our stomach is. And if you're not eating meat in particular, your body will say, like, well, why are we doing all this work to keep this super acidity in the stomach, which is calorically kind of expensive and difficult to do. So it will just kind of relax and not make as much of the acidic type of stomach issues. So those people may need things like digestive enzymes or things like that. But again, that's more for people that have been vegetarian or vegan. Most people that transfer from a standard American diet, or even easier usually, is from a ketogenic diet. It's just, how quickly do you want to remove the whatever plant matter you still have in your diet, and you should be able to tolerate it pretty well. Things that can help people initially are a lot of the same things that can help people when they first start keto. Some people experience flu-like symptoms. Things like salt and staying well hydrated can really help. Again, digestion can kind of change, and so just to expect that in the beginning. But overall, it should be very well tolerated by most people.
Yeah, wonderful. In terms of sustainability, what are your thoughts? And also supplementation, like, are we getting all the nutrients that we need to properly function long term?
Great question. Another great question. So a short answer, yes. To the supplements, very few supplements, I believe, are needed for most people. Some people say, in the carnivore community, say that you need to intake a high amount of things like organ meats. I personally do not think that is the case. My diet in particular is largely meat that is grain fed that I buy at the grocery store. I tell most people that I want them to have whatever animal products sound good to them that they can afford. I don't want people to get mixed up in the minutia of, can I only have grass fed, grass finished? Do I only have to buy from the local, rancher down the street? We are very fortunate in this country that the meat production, the egg production, the animal production we have, it's not without its problems, but it is at the very least very safe, especially when it comes to cows and other ruminants. There may be ethical reasons that people want to do grass-fed, grass-finished, but I also don't want people to think that this is an expensive diet or it's out of reach for most people. A lot of people don't know this either, and this is not something I do regularly, but places like McDonald's sell one ingredient foods, which is burger patties. Burger patties at McDonald's are 100% beef, and they're cooked on a flat top without any seed oils. And so I would also want people to know that, like, if you're in a pinch, if you're traveling, a vast majority of Americans live within a very close distance of the McDonald's, and they can eat really good quality food, even if they're, on a budget or traveling, whatever. Like there are ways to do this that are very inexpensive and very accessible for people. So as far as the supplementation, again, I would want to know what reason somebody is taking a particular supplement. Most people just have this cabinet full of supplements and they can never explain to me what these supplements are even doing for them. And so I'll usually just have people like finish out whatever supplements they've already paid for and see if they notice a difference before they go out and buy more of those supplements to see, like, does this make a difference in my life or not? There are some supplements that, generally speaking, most people could benefit. So that could be vitamin D, especially if you have darker skin or you live in a northern or southern climate where you don't see a lot of sun. Magnesium is one that a lot of people notice a lot of benefit from. Creatine is one that comes in red meat. And if you're eating a lot of red meat, you shouldn't need to benefit from, but it is the most tested supplement that only seems to have a lot of upside and not very much downside, including with mental health. But yeah, I know for me, like anytime I've ever eaten organ meats, I don't really notice a difference one way or another. I've supplemented with desiccated organ meats and I don't notice one way or another. So supplements are not necessary for a lot of people. There might be specific reasons that somebody needs that, but for the most part, it should be very simple, convenient, and delicious. Whatever fits that for most people is great.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And before I open, I want to make sure that everyone has a little bit of time to access you and pick up your brain if they have some questions. So if you do have questions, guys, feel free to raise your hand or put your question in the chat. And while people are doing that, I would love to hear your thoughts on exercise while on the diet and like performance. From what I'm gathering from you, that's has only improved, but also what science do you think is currently available for us to solely rely on that and like comfortably go with it?
Yeah, that's great. I would recommend anybody who's concerned about science to read this book, which is called The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Performance, done by Doctors Finney and Volek, where they explain a lot of this. It's a very easy read and not too complex or complicated. The main thing I would want somebody to know is if you are eating the standard American diet, you're eating a very high amount of carbohydrates, and your body will thus be burning a very high amount of carbohydrates. Most people never experience ketosis, outside of when they were babies, when they were in a very deep ketogenic state, because they're eating so many carbohydrates that their body is constantly burning all the carbohydrates. And that is what is causing the overweight and the fatness for most people. So most people would not be able to do an athletic event, a hard workout, without the Gatorades or the power bars or whatever people are using, because they are burning so much carbohydrate. When you shift over to fat burning, your body has so many calories of stored fat on it that you're just relying on the source of energy that you already have. There is a transition period. I would want somebody to know that there is a good, the quickest is probably like a month to 2 months, but it might be longer for more people. There's a transition period where when your body is learning how to burn fat, it may feel pretty crappy, especially when you're at really high heart rate ranges. And that takes time for your body to get used to. Now, like I said, I play ice hockey, which is a very high heart rate type of activity. We go very, very hard for a minute, minute and a half, and then we skate back to the bench and we rest. Now, where I'm at currently, I play not most, I play all of my hockey games completely in the fasted state when I'm about 20 to 22 hours fasted, and I have no crash in energy. I feel really good. I feel a little bit more slow and sluggish when I do consume food before, but that took time for me to get to. So not everybody can do that. Well, everybody can do that, but it takes some time to get used to. So I'd want somebody to know that. That said, carbohydrates as a fuel source in the body are so essential. Like your blood sugar, even myself, not consuming hardly any carbohydrates, my blood sugar never goes to zero. And what that means is even though carbohydrates in our diet are not essential, you could go the rest of your life and never have a carbohydrate for the rest of your life. You would not die because carbohydrates are so essential in your body. Your body can just easily make exactly the perfect right amount that you need right now based on what you're doing. And so you don't have to consume the carbohydrates. Your body just makes the perfect level all the time. Once you go through an adaptation period, it's just a very elegant way that the body runs its energy. You never have blood sugar crashes. Everything is very stable and steady. And yeah, you can do all kinds of different exercise on burning fat, which you already have, again, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of calories of energy on the body. So hopefully that's good news for most people. If they experience a drop in their performance, it usually is temporary. And once somebody gets to the other side of that, their performance, I would argue, would be either the same or even a little bit higher. Also with a list of 20 or 30 other amazing life benefits that are incredible, that again, just go to show you don't really need to be consuming high amounts of carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this amazing innate ability of our bodies to do what they need to do, right? We just learn not to rely on it to the extent where we're in trouble. But thank God we're slowly getting back to it. So a question for you here in the chat is, what are your thoughts on nightshades like peppers and tomatoes?
Great question. I love the question. Nightshades can be particularly difficult for some people. The anti-nutrient, I believe that's the highest in nightshades, is lectins. Dr. Gundry wrote a book about lectins called The Plant Paradox, which is kind of strange to me that he makes the argument that plants have anti-chemicals, including lectins, and so you should eat a bunch of plants. It's an interesting argument, but that could be problematic for some people. Yeah, with any plant food, there's always going to be a question. Is it a problem for me or not? Is it better if I cook them or not? With plant foods, there is always just a question. I can't say that, yes, they're going to be problematic for everybody. Some people can handle them and they're just fine. The other thing I want people to be thinking about is not only have we modified things like fruits and vegetables, like carrots now look nothing like what a natural carrot looks like. Same with watermelon. We've got these massive apples that are full of sugar and don't look like what real apples used to look like. Things like the Cavendish banana, the banana that everybody's used to seeing at the store, the navel orange, the Bartlett pear, a Granny Smith apple. These are all inventions. We made these. They're not natural, normal fruits. And if I wanted to eat tomatoes, like if I get tomatoes from the store, they taste terrible. First of all, they grow around me. People have gardens here in the Salt Lake Valley and tomatoes come out amazing, but they are available for like 1 month, maybe a month and a half. And they're amazing. They're delicious. If I see one and it's on the ground, I might eat one and it's fine. But there comes a hard freeze. And there is a time when, unless I want to go buy store tomatoes, which are awful, I don't access tomatoes. They are gone. They're not on the table for me. And so it's like the time I asked my grandparents, like, did they grow up eating spinach? They said yes, but we didn't eat it all year round. We only had it for like a month or so. So we're kind of used to going to the store wherever we live on the planet and seeing all kinds of exotic fruits and vegetables available. And so maybe it's just a question of we're eating them all year round for many, many years. And that's what's causing the issues for some people. So it's just something to be mindful of. But I do see that nightshades can be problematic for people. The only way to answer that question, like I said, there's always going to be a question. So the only way to really know is if you eliminate them, if you feel better without them, that's kind of, that's kind of your answer. And you can decide how you want to handle that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And then we have Tom who has a question. So I'm going to ask to unmute Tom and you can ask your question.
Yeah, thanks first of all, Casey. I'm a 8-year vegan, cold turkey. Only
Congratulations.
yeah, only keto since October. Really good gains from it, and I will not turn back. But some of the things that you had mentioned about oxidative crystals and things like that from spinach, I always had a weird feeling when I drink spinach and milk, so I know that there was something on there. But you had talked about almonds, and I had more than one question. But as far as almonds, almonds are still a big part of, like, all of the fats that I get from nuts are still a big part of my diet in keto. What is the issue with almonds specifically, and are there other nuts that are an issue as well?
Great question, Tom. It's great to meet you. Congratulations on the diet. That's so awesome. Good for you. Um, yeah, I would refer you to the work of Sally Norton. She is one of the primary authors that writes the book called Toxic Superfoods. Um, her website is amazing. Her social media is amazing. She's got a lot of free resources that you don't need to go out and get her book necessarily to learn about some of those things. Almonds can be a little bit high in oxalate. They just can, and your body has no use for oxalate. It can somewhat like detoxify things like lectins and phytic acid and other plant toxins. It has a tougher time with oxalate, so they just kind of sit around, and they'll tend to bind with minerals. So this is where, I mean, kidney stones are made of oxalate, generally speaking. Joint issues, a lot of people report having joint issues or gut issues because either the mechanical crystal version is like, it's almost like sandpaper, and it is abrasive and can cause a bit of damage, or the ion form of oxalate gets into the body and is immediately seeking calcium and other minerals that it can then bind to, and that's where some of the problems come in. So you can basically excrete about 150 milligrams of oxalate in a day, and you excrete it any way you excrete anything else. So when you go to the bathroom, when you breathe, some people will cut out oxalate and notice that their eyes are getting really crusty in the morning. That's one way that it'll come out. You can breathe it out. A lot of people don't associate things like belching and or hiccups with oxalate. And Sally will have a really nice list of all of the higher oxalate foods, and also really nice lists of plant foods that are very low in oxalate. And sometimes it's just as simple as like switching over from one form of a leaf to another form of a leaf, or one form of a nut to another form of a nut. Almond is a tricky one. It's higher in oxalate, but also it's tricky for a lot of us on keto, because what things do we start off, especially on a ketogenic diet? We're cutting out, grains. So now we're using almond flour. We're not doing dairy. So now we're doing almond milk. A lot of that's making its way into the blender with other high oxalate foods. And so it's just something to be mindful of. It is, I don't want to sound like I've got a tinfoil hat on when I'm telling people, oh, this is going to harm you. Like for majority of people, it's not that big of a deal. For some people, it will accumulate and cause problems. I will say that spinach is the one food that I just tell people I would just avoid spinach. That's the one food I would say, like, eat kale, eat other lettuces. There's so many other things you could switch over to, and spinach is just so eye-wateringly high in oxalate. I want to say like half a cup or a cup is it's almost like 1,000 milligrams. Like it's a big wallop of oxalate. And I just think most people, you can find an easy substitution for that. And just that's one that I just would not eat. So having some is fine. Also, be thinking about like when I asked my grandparents about the spinach, not only did they, oh, there you go, 1,000 milligrams per gram of spinach. So that's very high. When my parents consumed or my grandparents, when my grandparents consumed spinach, they cooked it and they would almost always serve it with a cream sauce. And so right there, cream has a high amount of calcium. And we just have learned through culinary that those two things, taste good. And not only that, but the calcium is helping to bind with the oxalate crystals so that they don't cause as many problems inside the body. So there's just ways around it. You can make substitutions, you can cook, you can ferment, you can soak. There's lots of different things that you can do to help mitigate that.
You made mention of the calcium just now, and one of the things I'm realizing, obviously you come off of vegan, you're eating fruits and vegetables, you get back onto the keto and you're eating a lot of dairy, and I'm having a hard time like getting to the point where I'm hitting my fat ratios and my protein. But you being a physical person, I'm currently working out more than I did in the past, and I'm having a hard time with the keto because almost forces you to lose weight. So calorically, I've had to really raise up calorically, but I'm wondering, can I play with that protein number and still hit like a metabolic therapeutic level so that I don't lose weight and I can actually, build muscle?
Great question. Yes, for sure. I see lots of people on, a low carb or no carb type diet. There is some certain trade-offs, and you mentioned it, which is great awareness. I can tell you've done your homework. Is like, if I increase my protein, am I then going to lower my amount of ketones in the blood? That might be a thing. And if you're dealing with something on the mental end of things, that may bring back some of the symptoms that people have, and they need to be mindful of not over consuming protein. For most of us, I would say we're probably just fine eating a higher amount of protein and having a lower amount of ketones in the blood. So yeah, calorically, increasing the amount of protein that you can eat should help a lot, should help you retain muscle mass. I don't see hardly anybody that has a tough time gaining muscle, even if they're not having carbohydrates in the diet. The dairy is tough. The dairy is a tricky one. Some people seem to tolerate it okay, and other people just really don't, especially when it comes to things like milk. Somebody might do better with a little bit of cheese here and there, or a little bit of yogurt, maybe some butter, but milk or cream, I see, can be kind of problematic for some people. And in that case, I would try to get somebody to get more of their protein from fatty meats. So, ribeye is probably one of the best as far as a great ratio of fat to protein. If you want poor man's ribeye, you're looking at like a chuck roast or chuck steak. Tastes almost exactly the same. It's delicious and has a good mix of fat and protein. Or, maybe somebody's buying ground beef and it's the 85-15 or 90-10, and maybe they could get a little bit more fat there. So that's where I'd encourage most people to get a bulk of their calories from versus getting it from dairy, especially if you're noticing that the dairy is problematic. Great question.
Thank you. I'm done.
Of course. Thanks, Tom. It was great to meet you.
Thank you, Tom. Casey, I'm mindful of time. I want to be respectful of your time as well. We do have some questions, but would you have a few more minutes?
I'm good. I've got time. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay,
yep.
Perfect. So then let's go with Steven Trans next. Sorry, here we go.
Who?
There he is. I just asked to unmute Steven, if you can. There we go.
There you go. Hey, Casey, what's up?
My hero, Steven T.
You're my idol. How's it going?
My man, I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I have an exercise question for you. And I want your answer to be for the average person. All right. What is your recommendation for the minimum amount of time needed to exercise per week? And what type of exercise do you think is best?
Steven T, great question. Oh, it's a great question. I love to answer it. With a personal training background, we're taught you need to be in the gym several times a day or several times a week, mixing things up as far as like different splits, upper body one day, lower body the next day. In the course of my career, I've come across high intensity training, which I believe you're familiar with. And high intensity training is often confused with high intensity interval training. HIIT is really, really popular. It's what you would see at, your Orange Theories and your workout studios where people are running around, jumping on things, throwing things, slamming things, whatever. High intensity training is a style of exercise, of strength training, where you push a weight, usually at a slow and controlled pace, but you push a weight until you are getting yourself to basically as close to failure as you possibly can. It's very, very challenging. You're causing an enormous amount of distress inside the muscle, but you're also sending a signal to your body that says that your current level of strength is not sufficient, and your body needs to build up its strength over time so that it can do more things. It can be more capable. Our bodies are inherently very lazy. We always want to be saving calories, not expending calories. Now we live in a world where calories are available everywhere, but that didn't always used to be the case. And so if you're going to the gym and you're spending a bunch of time there and you're doing your 3 sets to 12 of an exercise and you finish your last set and your last rep, and sure, you got some good movement in, but you set the weight down and you're done, you just sent a signal to your body that said, like, you have all the strength you currently need. There is no need to go through the process of increasing muscle, making the bones stronger, making the connective tissue stronger. It's only when you're pushing the level of, like, I'm getting to such a deep level of fatigue that I cannot push this weight one little bit further without compromising my form. When you do that, that type of intensity is on a teeter-totter with frequency, meaning if your intensity is high, then your frequency must be very, very low. So a big mistake I see people make is they're frequently at the gym and they're doing so many workouts that their intensity is not high enough for what it needs to send that signal. So the type of training that I promote can be found in 15 Minute to Fitness by Dr. Ben Bokikio, or Body by Science by Dr. Doug McGuff. And it literally is working out for about 15 minutes once a week, one set of maybe 5 to 8 different exercises until you are at utter failure. And that's it. I want people to use the remainder of the time that they were in the gym to go out and do something fun and enjoyable, like walking or, paddleboarding or whatever you enjoy doing. But yeah, if you're getting to a deep level of fatigue and intensity in the gym, the frequency can be very, very, very low. Which it's funny. I would think this would be like the best news for everybody to hear. And I get so much pushback on it. And people are like, no, I would get better if I went 5 times to the gym. I'm like, well, do you want to? Like, that doesn't sound very fun to me. And I'm a personal trainer. So I do get a lot of pushback on that. But yeah, if you read any of those books, they promote that really well. And it's definitely changed my way of thinking around exercise.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're the best. Great to see you.
Thank you. Kate.
Hello. Thank you for sharing everything you shared. My question is, I have been doing keto, I think it's been about 2 years, but I've definitely been off and on, and especially with decreasing my medication, like when I get stressed, it really triggers like cravings, and they're very strong, and I've just had trouble being consistent. And I was wondering if there are any like strategies you've shared with like clients who maybe have the same issues.
Yeah. Hi, Kate. Congratulations. 2 years on the diet. That's amazing. And if you've been able to reduce your medication, that's awesome. The easiest thing is just not to be stressed. You said you have stress, so just don't ever have stress and you'll be fine. I'm just kidding. Just stress is tricky, and we are the only animals that eat when we're stressed. So that is a very real problem. And it's so tricky because I get this question all the time, and like the answer is like, go for a walk rather than eat. When you're in a stressful moment, the last thing you're going to want to hear me say is, oh, Kate, you should just go for a walk. You'd probably want to punch me right in the face. Like, there are other things you can do. There's things that you can distract yourself with. But at the end of the day, in a stressful moment, it is really tricky. So yeah, again, you can, doing something physical when you're stressed can sometimes really help. Focusing on eating plenty of fats and proteins. Some people just don't fully understand truly how much things like fats and proteins that they should be having. They feel weird about eating 6 eggs, and so they only eat 2, and then they're quite hungry in a few hours. Or they feel weird about eating 4 burger patties. They only think they should have like 1.5 or whatever. And the cool part about a ketogenic or carnivore diet is you have full permission for the first time in your life, maybe, to eat until you are completely satiated. And truly getting to that level, giving yourself permission to get to that level, can be very helpful for reducing cravings for other things. And so, yeah, focusing on salty, fatty foods can be very helpful. Another thing that I'll say that it sounds weird, but if you're noticing that those cravings are really strong and you just can't kick them, a carnivore diet can be very helpful for being like, I thought I could be a moderator and be 90% and enjoy a treat here and there. And unfortunately for myself, I can't. I go off and I eat way more of the crap that makes me feel terrible, and I regret it. And I'll just spend like the next 2 days not only recovering from, the poor sleep or the anxiety that's come back, but I crave like nonsense that I don't normally think about. Like a box of donuts is like, oh, well, that looks good. A Taco Bell is like, whoa, that I could go for a taco. Like, stuff that I wouldn't normally crave comes back. And so for some people, 100% is easier than 90%. And as much as I hate being the one to tell people that, that was certainly the case for me in my own life. I do better when I avoid it. It's not the worst if I go off. It's just, again, it's a day and a half of anxiety and increased cravings. And it's not my favorite. So I don't know. I hope that helps. Stress is a really tricky one. And again, like if I told you to do breathing exercises when you were very stressed, like I'd want you to probably kick me in the shin or something. Like it doesn't seem to be very helpful, but focusing on the foods that make you very full, that take away cravings, are typically going to be fats and proteins, eaten to full satiety, well salted, that kind of thing. So yeah, awesome question. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Kate, for your question. Then we can go to Robert.
Yes, I got a question on here about longevity. How many people do you find in this lifestyle that are 80 and higher? And what are your thoughts about longevity? Because as you get older, your body chemistry seems to change a little bit. Well, can you talk about that?
And yeah, awesome question. Yes, I know a few. The one that I would look up if you want to see what this looked like in action is if you look up Maggie Carnivore, you might have to type in Alberta. She lives in Canada. This woman, Dr. Ben's a great example too. Yeah, Stephen T, good point. Maggie in Alberta has been on a carnivore diet for over 60 years. I believe she's 83 now. This woman, I heard her on Dr. Chafee's podcast, and I listen to my podcast pretty fast, usually at like 1.5 or 2 times the speed. And I'm listening to this woman get featured, and she's 82 years old. She's been on a carnivore diet for 60 years. She just never liked vegetables, so she never ate them, which works for her climate because they don't have a lot of vegetables. And she's talking, and I'm listening to her talk, and I'm like, this woman's not 82. There's no way. She's talking way too fast. She's too energetic. So I had to pull it up on video to see for myself with my own eyes what this woman looks like. This woman is crushing it in her 80s. She's working on her ranch every single day. She's learning Spanish so she can learn sailing at a new property they bought in Colombia. She works 365 days a year on the ranch in extreme conditions, and she is literally killing it. Stephen T put somebody in the comments, Dr. Bembo Kikyo, who we've already mentioned. I hung out with him this weekend at a conference. He's 76 years old and is absolutely thriving physically as well. There are people like Mark Sisson in his 70s who's on a carnivore diet who is physically super fit and thriving. Another woman you can look up is Lisa Wiedemann. She's a doctor who I believe she's getting to her 70s. She's been on a carnivore diet for about 15 years, and she takes videos of herself doing cartwheels on the beach every single day, like thriving in the sunshine, and never gets a sunburn, and just is absolutely thriving. So as far as longevity goes, obviously we don't know. We do know that there are whole populations like the Maasai or certain Inuit tribes that didn't have access to plants, and they never had issues with longevity.
I've heard of the Inuits. Yeah.
So the answer is we don't really know. There's also questions about things like cholesterol. Like we really don't know. It is walking around. We know a certain subset of people walk around with an extremely high level of cholesterol, like LDL cholesterol, for example. I've already mentioned my friend Robin Dobbins, who reversed her bipolar on a very low, ketogenic / carnivore diet. And if she introduces as much as 1/2 of a sweet potato in her diet, her cholesterol will drop right down to where it needs to go, but her bipolar symptoms come right back. So she takes out the sweet potato, goes back on a strict carnivore diet, all of her bipolar symptoms go away, and she doesn't have any medications, and her cholesterol goes up to be 3 times, 4 times, 5 times higher than what a doctor says it should be. So people like that, they're called lean mass hyperresponders. They have to make incredibly difficult and nuanced decisions about how they're going to live their lives, which is why we're so appreciative of some of the research that's coming and being done by Dave Feldman and some of his associates that are measuring heart scans with people that are walking around with very high cholesterol. And I will just say, at most health conferences that I go to, that somebody like Dr. Sean Baker will stand up in the front of the room and he will ask everybody in the audience to raise their hands. And he'll say something like, keep your hand up if you eat more meat than you used to. Keep your hand up if you eat less fruits and vegetables than you used to. Keep your hand up if you feel better now than you ever have in the rest of your life. And then he'll ask the question and say, for all of you people, what if we're wrong? We think we understand that cholesterol and LDL in particular is not harmful in high amounts in certain metabolic conditions. Say we're wrong. Maybe we are completely wrong about it. How many of you right now are willing to change your diet and go back to what you were doing before to alleviate some of the concerns that you have about cholesterol? And I don't ever hardly see anybody put their hand down. When I ask Robin in particular, is it worth it to go back on, bipolar symptoms and medications? She would much more happier die tomorrow of a heart attack than she would going back to the way things were going before. I've asked her husband the same question. Like, it's one thing if you want to do this for your own diet. What about your wife? This is the person that you care about the most. She's walking around with a cholesterol level that is super high that most people would freak out about. That's pretty uncomfortable. Like, what do you say to her? What do you do? And I love his answer where he said, like, I would not trade one single day of having my wife be present and creating memories with our children, where she was basically comatose on a couch for years, missed her entire life walking by. And now he has his wife back, and they don't care necessarily how long they live healthy. So it's a great question about the longevity. We have anecdotes. We see people that are out there that seem to be thriving on this type of a diet. We see large populations like the native populations that we mentioned who have very long lives. We see that it's a fairly healthy way to live. And so we assume that to be the case. But again, most people that I know, they don't care whether they live another year, another month, another 50 years. They feel so good on this diet that they're not willing to give it up regardless. So it's a good question. I can't answer it exactly. We don't know, and nor will we ever. But it's worth thinking about it critically and deciding how you want to live your life and focusing on health span and lifespan longevity at the same time. Good question.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Robert. And then we can move to Chris.
Okay. Thank you, Casey. That was a great presentation. Really appreciate you helping out with our group here.
Oh, thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it. You guys have been a blast.
And I know we've gotten over time, so I just wanted to kind of just thank you for what you did. And I think you did a really good summary. I, like you, have been on it about the same amount of time, and those have been my experiences on it as well. I did come from more of that vegan background for many decades, and there was a lot of oxalate dumping. I didn't feel any negative things to it. It just took a long time.
Isn't it surprising how long it takes?
It was like 2 or 3 years, and I was just excreting it. I would notice it, pardon the grossness, but the urine, I would notice it in that, and it was just, for probably two or 3 years. And I don't think I had it in the beginning, for the first year. So, but coming from the diet that I came from, it does make sense. And I'm nearly 60 now, so I've probably had a long time to accumulate some of these things. So
anyway, speaking of longevity, you look amazing at age 60, so you're doing something right.
Yeah, that's everything you said. I back it up. It surprised me. And I really like you saying things like, if you're not second guessing in the culture that we grew up with, that labeling of carnivore diet and what that means, it's so counter what we were brought up with, especially since the 70s. Yep. That fat is bad and animal products are bad and all those other things. If you're not second guessing it, I don't know that you're that's not the source I want to get my information from. And so, coming into it with a little bit of trepidation. This is a group, as it sounds like, that really getting it right, dialing it in, and keeping that fat up is probably for most people in the beginning. And I think there's some other hacks that, like goat and sheep products like yogurt or kefir for one of you, Richard, or Tom was talking about having a hard time with that milk protein. This is a different type. It's a lot more usable. You can find it without too many hardships. So goat or sheep, adding more egg yolks, taking away some of the whites and your egg stuff, and you'll up your fat. Macadamia nuts, those don't have the oxalates. So those are like quick, easy hacks to kind of bump that up.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. That's great. Yeah, that's a great point. I love all of that.
Yeah. But I appreciate it, Casey. You did a great job.
Thank you very much, Chris. Great to meet you. And like I said, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it. You look great. You're a good example for the rest of us.
Thanks, buddy.
Of course.
Thank you so much, Chris. Casey, thank you so much. And thanks, everyone. I know there are some questions in the chat, but I would like to have those people, Casey, potentially get in touch with you if they would like, and maybe send you a text. Are you on socials? Tell us where people can find you if they want.
Yeah, of course. Oh, I would love it. Anybody can reach out to me at any time. I tell everybody this, that I put my phone on airplane mode when I go to bed. I literally have clients all over the world. I've got people in New Zealand and Dubai and Ireland. And so anybody can message me 24/7 at any time. I'm happy to give out my cell phone number and somebody could text or call me. The easiest place to find everything is our website, which is myboundlessbody.com. And the first thing that people will see is a book now button where people can schedule a 30-minute session with me, and we can talk about anything. We don't try to pitch people services unless they ask about them. It's just a 30-minute call to answer questions and just have a chat. If you're curious about different exercises you can do, we can demonstrate them. I can, give you workout programs that I've created for other people for free so that you know what you can do in the gym and have different exercises. We can discuss dietary changes, nuances there. I love connecting with people. I say on my podcast all the time too, like, even if you just book a 30-minute session and introduce yourself, say hi. I love connecting with people in the community. So on the website, you'll also see our social medias. We're on most of the social medias. You'll find our podcast, which is Boundless Body Radio. We do releases every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Recently, I have interviewed a vast majority of the people like Donica who have won the Fresh Start Award. I got to see Jane Allison Bazuki this weekend. Finally got to meet her in person, and on behalf of everybody that they have helped, I got to give her a huge hug and thank her in person for that. But yeah, anybody can find us through the website. You can message me, you can email me, all that stuff should be there. But myboundlessbody.com is the easiest way to find us.
Amazing. Yes, I put a link in the chat. I'm gonna link it in the episode description as well. But Casey, I just want to acknowledge your energy and like your dedication to the field, and how much in-depth of a work have you done through your own experience and through helping others. And thank you for taking the time and share your wisdom and experience with us. We are absolutely grateful. I think it was very valuable information, and I think we're all living inspired and with a little bit of more knowledge and understanding. So thank you again. Looking forward to continuous projects potentially in future. Thanks for all the value you continue bringing through your podcast. And yeah, I would love to have you again at a later point potentially.
Anytime you like, Donica. You did a great job. You asked great questions, and so did everybody in the group. I had an absolute blast. So thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Awesome. Thank you. And thanks everyone. And you guys have a great day. See you all. Bye-bye.